Hello, and welcome to I Am Not For Everyone, the podcast for those looking to release shame, heal from trauma, and feel really, really good being their fully expressed, authentic selves. My name's Dr. Lee, and I am a doctorally prepared nurse practitioner and a certified clinical trauma professional, as well as a mom, wife, and a human being navigating the world with complex PTSD. Season 1 of this podcast came about because I was tired of spending decades living in a shame-filled, trauma-laden body and brain. And after doing a lot of work and learning how to return to a safe, grounded place in my life, I knew it was time for me to take my experience in education and use my voice to unsilence myself, to release the leftover shame, and to give others permission to do the same. On Season 2 of this podcast, I'm going to be sharing my experience in education. But even more importantly, I'm going to be bringing on some incredible guests who are going to unsilence themselves. They're going to share their own stories of trauma, shame, and their journeys to healing, resiliency, and self-acceptance. While I believe these episodes will be deeply impactful, I do want to add a disclaimer that we're going to be talking about some potentially triggering topics. So please take the invitation to pause or skip or fast forward on any episode, and to treat yourself gracefully and kindly after each time that you listen. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, happy Thursday. Okay, spared random phone call. I was just talking to my husband about this topic and how jazzed I was to talk with y'all about this topic today, because first of all, this is still a relatively new development in terms of talking about threat responses and trauma responses. And there's some newly emerging research that has come out around fawning that is actually really changing how we look at the fawn response, because the fawn response, what a lot of us think of as fawning, there's actually other behaviors. There's two distinct behaviors that are happening in the fawn response. And there's another behavior that sometimes we see as a trauma response in humans that we think is fawning, that is actually something much more serious and much more significant that we need to pay attention to. So I'm going to talk about those three things, the two things that are actually part of the fawn response, including one that we often don't consider, and then the piece that actually we need to pull out of the fawn response and put somewhere else. And then the other thing, before we get into that, I want to do is just do a really quick overview of the nervous system for y'all. And not the entire nervous system. I mean, that would be, when I taught that in pathophysiology, that was like a 2-hour long lecture. I want to have a super quick chat about how your threat response works in your body, because this is crucial to understanding the fawn response and the other responses that we're going to talk about. So we talked about fight last week. Did anyone who liked fight, and anyone listen to that? Anyone have a chance to watch that? Did you learn some things from that? Let me know. So we talked about fight last week, and we were talking about how fight and flight are sympathetic nervous system responses. And the reason why I'm putting fawn here next is because fawn is also a sympathetic nervous system response. So when we talk about our nervous system and how it responds, how it works in our daily lives, we are going to use something called Polyvagal Theory. And Polyvagal Theory is a theory that was developed by, I believe, Dr. Stephen Porges. And Polyvagal Theory basically states that our nervous system functions in 3 different realms, depending on how safe we feel and how helpful or helpless we feel. So when we are feeling like we have agency, we control, and we are feeling safe, our ventral vagal nervous system is what is dominantly being activated and what is dominantly determining how our brain is thinking and functioning. Now, we have a vagus nerve that runs the length of our body. And that nerve, for a long time, we thought just had one function. We thought that nerve was was what activated the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. If the sympathetic nervous system's job is to get you ready to fight, to flee, to get away from a threat, the parasympathetic nervous system's job is to calm all that back down. A lot of times you'll hear things like rest and digest when you think of the parasympathetic nervous system. So blood goes to your gastrointestinal tract. It goes to other vital organs besides the heart and the lungs. It comes out of the arms and the legs where it has to be during sympathetic activation in order to help you fight or run, to flee. And it helps perform all of the body functions that we really don't care about when we are trying to actively survive. That is how we used to look at the vagal nerve. Now, what we've found over the last several decades of research is that we can really split the vagal nerve into two different pieces. We can split it into the ventral vagal nerve, which from an anatomical position standpoint, ventral means higher up towards the head, dorsal means down lower, okay? So when we think of the ventral vagal nervous system, the ventral vagal nervous system is activated when we feel safe and when we feel like we have agency and control. When we are put into situations that feel unsafe and we still feel like we have agency, the sympathetic nervous system kicks in. The sympathetic nervous system kicks in and it takes all the blood from those vital organs and from the gastrointestinal tract and sends it into your arms and your legs and makes it so that you can fight or you can run or so you can fawn. Okay. If that doesn't work, or if we are in a situation where we don't feel like we have agency, we don't feel like we have control, we feel like we are helpless, that is when the dorsal vagal nerve kicks in. And the dorsal vagal nerve is a very ancient part of the nervous system. And there's a lot of animals out there, animals that can't fight and can't flee and can't fawn because they don't have the mental capacity to fawn. They only have a dorsal vagal system. And so they go into freeze and to faint mode. They go into, I'm going to play dead. I'm going to pretend like nothing's happening. I'm going to completely shut down and try to survive in that way. And we as humans do that our dorsal vagal nervous system gets activated in situations where we can't fight, where we can't flee, where we can't fawn. And that's when we end up in freeze mode and in faint mode, which we're going to talk about in a few weeks. But the reason I want you to understand that is because fawning oftentimes, it's a really cool adaptive threat response that we humans and some other animals have adapted. And basically, when we fawn, our sympathetic nervous systems are activated. And what we are doing is we are making it look to the other animal, to the other individual, to the thing that is threatening us, like we are still in ventral vagal response. What we are doing is we are pretending to feel safe. We are pretending to feel like we are in control, and we are pretending to feel like everything is okay. And we are doing whatever we can to convince the other person in front of us, their nervous system, that everything is fine, that everything is safe, that they don't have to be activated either. Fawning is, if you can think about this from an evolutionary perspective, has really become one of the dominant trauma responses in human life, in society, because it is the easiest one to participate in and still look like you are a part of the community, still look like you feel safe, still look like you are managing, you are adapting, you are okay. And so fawning is so fascinating because it actually it's made up of two different things. So fawning has the way in which we fawn entirely depends on, and the situations in which we decide which way we're going to fawn entirely depends on if we have a secure attachment or an insecure attachment to the person in front of us. And I'll explain what that means. And it also depends on if we had insecure or secure attachments to our primary caregivers. Now, what is attachment? Again, this is another thing we could talk about for several hours. The thing I'm going to say here is that for most of us, we had relatively secure attachments to at least one primary caregiver in our lives. And for a significant amount of people, they never had a secure attachment. And what I mean by a secure attachment is this. In order to have a good, secure attachment with a primary caregiver, one of the main people who took care of you in your infancy and your early childhood years, we need 3 things in 5 categories. We need limits, we need guidance, and we need nurturing. And we need those limits, guidance, and nurturing in mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and sexual realms. Mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, and sexual realms. If one of our primary caregivers either does not set limits and does not give us guidance around one of those 5 primary realms, or if a caregiver in particular does not give us nurturing in one of those 5 realms, this is where insecure attachment can form. And this is why I think it's really important to start. And I want to say this, I am, the theories and the way that I am interpreting this information, this is mine based on a lot of different researchers and a lot of different methods and theories and practices out there. So you're probably not going to find this particular way of explanation in a textbook somewhere, because this is like an amalgamation and a synthesis of a lot of different places. So if there's a part of this that you're like, I don't know if I believe that or not, great. Take it with a grain of salt. Do whatever you'd like with this. But this is my educated interpretation, amalgamation of this information. So a lot of theorists say that like people are either insecurely or securely attached to their primary caregivers. And for me, I think that, again, that's a very black and white way of saying things. I think it's way more important for us to look at where we were securely attached to our primary caregivers, in what realms we were securely attached and in what realms we weren't securely attached. Because I think for every individual out there, there's at least one of these 3 things, limits, guidance, and nurturing, that was not provided in one of those 5 realms. And in fact, as a parent, now knowing this information, this is my primary goal, to make sure that I am providing limits, guidance, and nurturing in all 5 of these areas for my children, because I would like them to have as secure of attachments as possible. Also, my children are 11 and 9. And so we're at the point where we're really working on building resiliency and changing some of the things that they learned about their attachments, because I didn't know this when they were younger and when they were attaching. And I also wasn't at the level of emotional regulation and groundedness and alignment that I am now. And so owning that, knowing that as a parent, I can now take those three things and apply it to those 5 categories and really help my children build resilience and have more secure attachment with me now, is something that's very helpful. So if you're beating yourself up as a parent, hearing that going, oh my gosh, I don't know that I've done that. Great. Now you have a really awesome guidepost to guide you as you move forward parenting your children. But getting back to attachment, when it comes to the fawning response, if we had an insecure attachment, particularly a neglectful attachment, one of our primary caregivers or both of our primary caregivers did not meet our nurture needs in at least one, but usually multiple of these categories, or if a primary caregiver violated one of these needs. So we have intrusive breaking of these attachments, meaning that the primary caregiver violated one of these things. They set way too hard of limits, They didn't provide any or they set way too hard of limits. The guidance they provided was harmful or really inappropriate, or there was too much nurturing, there was too much attention, especially from a sexual standpoint. That can cause problems with attachment. And if a parent is neglectful in any of these areas, that can also cause insecure attachment. So you can see why, from my perspective, I think it's really hard for us to say insecure versus secure. I think we all have some forms of insecure attachment somewhere in one of these, multiple of these categories, or in one of these ways. And let me know if this is resonating. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you at once, which is also why y'all should get into the trauma certification so you can learn this at a deeper level over 9 months instead of over 1 hour where I throw this at y'all. If this is something that's really fascinating you, if you find like this is serving you. So, when we have insecure attachment, when we are with people who we feel relatively secure, oftentimes the fawning response that we present is not the people-pleasing response. It is the attach, cry for help response. The attach, cry for help response. And we see the attach, cry for help response, particularly in people who at a very early age experienced neglect, where their needs, especially their base needs and their needs for connection and love, were not met. Sometimes this is not through the fault of the parent at all. This is due to the mother or the father or the child themselves are incredibly sick when they are born. So the inability to actually provide nurturing, to provide physical touch that feels good, to provide affection and love is very hard. This can be due to thinking about marginalized identities, like we've talked about before, people in very low socioeconomic statuses where the parents have to work 16, 18 hours a week or a day. They're leaving the children alone because they don't have any caregivers. And so that child is forced to really grow up quickly and doesn't receive the love, the connection, the attention, the affection because the parent is just simply too tired trying to survive. There's lots of ways that those needs in early infancy and in childhood can be left unmet that aren't intentional, that are truly from a survival standpoint for the parent, or a trying to keep the parent or the child alive, a survival standpoint from that perspective, from a medical perspective. So we see attach, cry for help come out when people have had a significant lack of nurturing and a significant lack of emotional connection and love. And so when they get into a situation with somebody who has been loving them and has been showing them connection or has been showing them affection, and that person provides some form of limit or criticism, or is unable to nurture in that moment for whatever reason, oftentimes we will see this person do the cry for help, which is they will get very emotional. They will start to talk about how awful they are, or how they wish that they weren't the way that they were. They will do what looks like very manipulative behavior to try to get this other person to reconnect, re-engage, and to provide love and affection and attention. Now, the interesting thing about this part of the fawn response, and by the way, this is, like I said, sympathetic nervous system activation. This can look and feel like ventral vagal, right? Especially if the person who participates in attach, cry for help is in a relationship with somebody who likes to rescue, somebody who participates in rescuing, right? The way they fight is they come in and they swoop in and they fix the problem, right? If this person is in relationship with somebody who likes to rescue, this is where codependency can really come into play. This is where codependency can really come into play, because this person over here never had modeling for how to they never had a healthy connection with a primary caregiver who modeled healthy attention, love, and affection. And so they never learned how to give that to themselves. They never learned how to create healthy relationships in which they are able to meet their own needs for love, affection, and attention, and also ask for that, set healthy boundaries around that with other humans. I know, right? When I learned this, I was like, oh, okay. Now I know what's happening sometimes here, right? I'm going to be vulnerable here. This used to happen with my husband and me. My husband would give me criticism or would say, like, you know what, the way that you've been showing up in our relationship, like, really hasn't been serving and meeting my needs. And I would completely fall apart and would like start beating myself up, like participating in self-flagellation in front of him, would be crying, would be getting so upset. Well, actually, first I would fight. I would deny the things for a while. And then I would come. And then when that didn't work, when the fight response didn't work, I would then go into attach, cry for help. And my husband, my poor husband, who's like trying to just say, hey, I have a need that's not being met, all of a sudden is comforting me when he was the one who needed his needs addressed in that moment. And so you can see how this can create a lot of resentment. This can actually make the person that you're trying to attach to, that you're trying to get love from, that you're trying to get to help you manage your own emotions, to pull away, which then causes the attach, cry for help to sometimes get even worse, because this person, as they pull away, as they decide not to participate in rescuing, it feels like that early infancy, early childhood neglect is occurring all over again. And it actually further cements and patterns in this feeling of, nobody loves me. I don't get to have, like, nobody cares about me. Nobody is affectionate for me. People always leave me. I'm never going to be able to have somebody who stays. So this is a version of people pleasing that is not talked about nearly as often, because when we really are of fawning, because when we really get down to it, it doesn't look like people pleasing. But this is still fawning. This is still emotionally manipulating the other person in the relationship to try to get what we need from them, to try to get them to feel like they are less of a threat to us. And so that's why I really include this in the fawn response, is because fawning is basically saying, let me emotionally manipulate you so that I can get you handled, so that I can get back to worrying about how I'm feeling. So I wanted to talk to you about attach, cry for help, because attach, cry for help is also something that we see in people who are labeled as borderline personality disorder, people who are labeled as highly sensitive, people who are labeled as having other forms of emotional dysregulation disorders, or emotional regulation disorders. And the thing of that is that the very thing that these people are trying to get, oftentimes, like we said, it makes the other person pull away, or the other person does come over and rescue them, and then they feel resentment, they feel gross, they're like, oh my gosh, like, I feel like they're okay now, but I'm not. And it breeds problems, it breeds resentment, it breeds disconnection in that relationship. And so, yes, I'm so glad, Deborah, you talked about this with your client. This happens with clients. Attach, cry for help clients are oftentimes reaching out to you. They want to be very connected to you. They want you to fix their problems. They want you to tell them exactly what to do. They want you to give them love and attention and affection. They oftentimes will try to get around boundaries that you've set in order to get your attention and get your affection. So if you're paying attention to another client, they may start doing something to try to get you to pay attention to them. And so clients who have the attach, cry for help response, this trauma response, what we want to do with these clients is we want to have thinking about those three things, right? These patients, well, maybe they're patients, these clients, these loved ones, they need nurturing, but they also need limits and guidance on how it feels best to be in relationship with you. So thinking about firm, loving guidance and boundaries is going to be really, really important here. And yes, if you feel like sometimes you become that client, really telling whomever you get into relationship with of like, hey, this is something that I'm actively working on. If you notice me doing this, like we can come up with a plan for me to, for like us to have a safe word that when you say it, I know that I'm violating a boundary, that I'm crossing a boundary. And I know that that word is said with love and care and compassion. Thinking about, and one of your primary goals for these clients is to actually make sure that when they go into that response, you are regulating your nervous system. Because we don't want you going into people pleasing. We don't want you going into people pleasing. And we also don't want you going into flight or fight, right? As this person is sympathetically activated, it's making your body feel sympathetically activated. And you're going to go to whatever your normal response here is. And sometimes it's going to be fight, and sometimes it's going to be flight, and sometimes it's going to be people pleasing, right? So being really aware of when you are with these clients and when you're really with any client, what is going on in your own body. And if you are feeling your heart start racing, if you are feeling electrical activation, if you are feeling the desire to get up and move and run away, if you are feeling the desire to start arguing with this client, what that tells you is that your body is activated in response to theirs. And as the coach, as the provider, as the business owner, it is your job and your responsibility to get yourself back to a regulated state so that you can co-regulate for this human in front of you in a healthy, safe way, supportive way that provides firm, loving guidance and boundaries. And the first couple of times you do this with this client, it may not feel good for them. So also just praising, right? Praising them of like, hey, I know this is really hard for you to not have this access, this 24-hour, 24/7 access to me. Like, let's talk about that on our next call next week. Or, hey, I know that it's hard for you. And sometimes your brain starts telling you a story that I don't care about you, or that I don't want you as my client, or that you're not important to me. And I really want to witness and honor that. And also, I want to take some time to make sure that I'm regulated here so that I can effectively coach or work with you. And so I'm going to make sure that I'm honoring my own needs as well so that I can meet yours, right? These types of conversations are the types of conversations that you'll learn to have in the TRIP certification that is launching on the 17th of November. We're going to open that up to everyone. And also, if you are listening to me talk about becoming emotionally regulated again, like I did the live on the easy method, and we are also doing a live event on the 17th called the 10-second protocol event. And this is an event where I'm basically teaching you how to emotionally regulate so that you can have incredibly satisfied and like lifelong clients and intimate partners and friends and employees and teammates, because you know how to regulate yourself to the point that you start teaching others, your nervous system starts teaching other people's nervous systems how to be calm and grounded and regulated. So if that sounds like something that is of interest to you, if you want your clients to, and your friends and your employees and your team members and your intimate partner to become lifers, meaning people that just really stick with you for a very long time because they feel safe and supported in your space, then you're definitely going to want to hop on, sign up for that event. And we'll put the link for that sign up in the comments in just a minute. Sarah, actually, if you could do that, that would be great. If not, I can do it at the end. So I want to move into people pleasing now. So that is the attached cry for help. That is the attached cry for help. The people pleasing is a little different. The people pleasing is going to feel, and I want you to think about this as the attached cry for help has an element of desperation to it, has an element of if I don't get this need met for love, connection, and attachment, I feel like I'm going to die. I feel like I'm going to not be okay. I feel like I'm not going to survive. People pleasing is a little more insidious. People pleasing is a response to more of a chronic danger and threat. People pleasing happens when it feels unsafe for us to be ourselves. I'm going to say that again. People pleasing occurs in situations where it feels unsafe to be ourselves. People pleasing is very much a shame response. People pleasing is, how can I become a chameleon and change how I'm showing up in this situation to minimize the chronic threat that I am feeling existing in whatever space that I am in. So this is why we see people pleasing so much in your work and in your business, and sometimes in your relationships, your intimate relationships and your friend relationships. So, and yeah, Deborah, I love that you're the comments that you're leaving here, because another thing I just want to mention is if you're like, oh my gosh, I fight. Oh my gosh, I have some attached cry for help tendencies. Oh my goodness, I do go into people pleasing response. Most of us have all of these responses. The dorsal vagal responses that we're going to talk about, the dorsal vagal system, less people have those responses. Those are more significant trauma responses in like truly helpless situations. And like I said, there's still a significant amount of people who experience those to the point that we need to understand. And those typically happen with more severe traumas that cause more significant, long-lasting effects. So we'll get to there. But when we talk about people pleasing, I'm in a workplace environment where it doesn't feel safe to show people my full self because I've been shamed for showing people my full self before. People pleasing often happens in psychologically unsafe environments, not physically unsafe environments. Let me say that again. People pleasing often happens in psychologically unsafe environments, not physically unsafe environments. People pleasing, and I can speak to this very well, right? As a biracial woman, there is a lot of people pleasing that happens. If anyone has ever heard of the term code switching, so this is something that people of color, people of cultures outside of Eurocentric white America will do in Eurocentric white America in order to fit in. And this is a form of people pleasing. Because code switching means that when I am with people that it feels like it is psychologically safe for me to show up as my full authentic self, I will absolutely do that. But the second that somebody comes into that space that is not of a marginalized identity, that is not a person of color, is somebody that has, from a systemic level, is somebody that could cause psychological threat, is somebody that could get me in trouble, is somebody that could get the police called on me, is somebody that could cause me to lose my job, is somebody that could cause me to lose my kids, is somebody that could cause me to have actual, sometimes physical harm to my life. I'm going to switch into a different mode where the way that I interact, the way that I talk, the way that I do things looks different in order to try to assimilate, in order to try to be a chameleon, in order to fit in. Now, I want to just take the political and the current social political conversation out of this, because there are some people in this group that I'm sure may have the perspective that psychological threat is not a thing. And what I want to say to anyone in this group who may be like, I don't think psychological threat is a thing, I'm going to introduce a probably novel concept to you. If you are somebody who doesn't people please, then you are likely somebody that people please too. If you are somebody that doesn't feel the need to people please in any situation, who feels relatively safe being themselves in every space in our current society, you are likely somebody that will experience a lot of people pleasing to you. And here is what I want to also say about this is that doesn't mean that you are psychologically unsafe as a human. It doesn't mean that you as an individual are a psychologically unsafe human. What it means is that in the current context of our culture, a generalization is being made by the human brain of people who look like this and who act like this and who have this role or have this capacity or have this power are going to feel psychologically unsafe to me. And some of that is breeded by our media and our social media and by is intentionally jacked up to keep us feeling psychologically unsafe, because when we feel psychologically unsafe, we tune in more to media and social media and things like that. Because psychological threat, psychological unsafety, the response to that in our bodies when we feel psychologically unsafe is hypervigilance. We stay very vigilant. We look for any psychological threat that could be around any corner. And the second we see something that we have learned is threatening, we will go into people please mode. We will chameleon. We will assimilate. We will do things differently. Now, on how do I say this? On an individual level with other humans, sometimes we do this because of an attachment reason. This isn't just always systemic, marginalized identities, people pleasing in a way to survive. Like, yes, that is a level at which we want to have this conversation around people pleasing and fawning. But I actually want to take this more to a granular level due to individual relationships and talk about going back to attachment. When we look at insecure attachment, if we had individuals in our lives that felt psychologically unsafe, meaning we never knew how they were going to show up in a certain situation, meaning that sometimes that primary caregiver would provide nurturing and limits and guidance, and sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes they would be really heavy on the limits and really, really scarce on the nurturing. And other times they would be really generous with the nurturing and very scarce on the limits. And so we never knew what version of that primary caregiver we were going to get. And so we participated in our own form of people pleasing where we stayed very hyper vigilant so that we could tell whenever that primary caregiver was switching styles, was switching how they were showing up, so that we could adapt and interact with them in a way that decreased the threat. Is this landing? Do you guys understand what I'm saying here? When we have a primary caregiver that if we spill a glass of milk one time, it's fine. And if we spill a glass of milk another time, they lose their shit. If we have a primary caregiver that we can't ever know how they're going to react, that feels dangerous to our little itty bitty nervous systems. And so it says, okay, let's stay super on alert so that we can look for and try to avoid any things that may set this person off, because we never know when they're going to get set off. We never know when they're going to get upset. We never know when they're going to get, we're going to get in trouble, or we're going to have limits set, or we're going to have a physical violation where we're spanked or we're beat or we're neglected, where we do something and then they take away the love and the attention and we don't know when we're going to get it back. So people pleasing, especially in intimate relationships and in friendships, can get a little hairy, because now we're with somebody who may or may not actually still have those patterns. Because what I also want to do is just validate you. I want to validate you if you keep ending up in relationships with people who are who feel psychologically unsafe, who you never know how they're going to show up. And I am going to be incredibly just open and transparent with you and tell you that I used to be this human. When my kids were younger, when I was chronically sleep deprived, when I had not processed any of my own trauma, when I was in my own shit, I was this human to my kids and to my husband. And now, knowing that, now having done a lot of the work that I have in the last several years, what I will say is this, is that I want you to use me as evidence that you can, you can stop that, right? You can stop being the adult that has the varied response. Like I said, you can start focusing in on, am I providing consistent, nurturing guidance and limits in these 5 areas for the people that I am raising and toward the people that I am in relationship with. So just letting you know, as a personal example, sitting in front of you, if you're somebody who's like, I'm never going to be able to stop doing that, yes, you can. So here to help with that. And if you are on the receiving end of that, if you keep noticing that you end up, because when we experience insecure attachments, when we experience childhood trauma, one of 2 things happens. I should say one of 3 things happens. We either do everything we can and actually become the opposite of that person that traumatized us, or have the opposite response of the person that traumatized us, or we end up repeating the pattern, or we do a mix of both. And a lot of us end up doing a mix of both. So when it comes to, if you are on the receiving end, if you are on this receiving end, sometimes we become that person, and sometimes we continue to get into relationship with people, including bosses, including clients, not just intimate relationships. We get into relationship with people in a way that perpetuates that cycle, because that is what our nervous system is used to. Let me say this very clearly. If you are somebody who learned people pleasing as an adaptive survival response in childhood, it is not going to feel good for your nervous system. It's going to feel very dangerous for your nervous system at first when we start taking you out of hypervigilance. When we start taking you out of hypervigilance, when we start taking you out of spaces where and telling your nervous system, hey, you don't have to be on alert all the time. You don't have to be jacked up all the time. You don't have to be consistently activated and in a sympathetic nervous response. That is going to feel unsafe, because your nervous system is going, but wait, we've used this for 27 years. Wait, we've used this for 5 decades. You're telling me now that we don't have to be in this all the time? This is going to take a while for me to feel safe doing this. And so this is one of those times we have to show ourselves an extreme amount of love and compassion and self-acceptance, because this is going to take a while. This is going to take a hot minute for us to undo this. So if you are a people pleaser, really, if you notice yourself people pleasing, what your body is telling you, if you are having these responses where you are doing things that you actually don't want to do just to try to avoid making other people upset, to make other people feel happy, to not be a burden, to not be a disappointment, to not bother other people, if you're noticing that this is what you're doing, your body is telling you that it feels unsafe. Your body is also potentially telling you that you have gotten yourself into relationship with bosses and with colleagues and with clients and with intimate partners that aren't very well emotionally regulated. And so that is an impetus to look at, is this a relationship that I can stay in and do my own work and heal because this other person is also committed to doing that? Or is this a relationship where I need to step out of this so that I can heal, and then maybe I'm going to be able to come back in, but I might not. I need to step out and heal. And then if this other person decides to step out and heal too, great. But if not, this relationship needs to end. And again, I'm also evidence that the relationship doesn't have to end for you to do this work. My husband and I have been together for 17 years in January. And the first several years of our marriage, and he knows that I'm sharing this, the first several years of our marriage had a lot of trauma in them. had a lot of this in there. And we made the decision that we were going to stay and do the work, and that it was going to be messy, and that there were going to be a lot of it was going to be hard, and we knew that. And also we made the decision that we loved each other enough that we were going to work through our own stuff and figure out where we were activating each other and figure out where our wounds were and be able to do this. And we're going to do a whole live on intimate relationships and trauma bonding. So we will get there. But I just wanted to put that piece in here because I think so often what we say, the assumption is that you have to get out of the relationship. And if both people in the relationship are willing to do the work, or you're at least willing to go first and see if anything changes, because that's another piece, right? Maybe you have to go first and see if the thing changes. Because sometimes you just learning how to run your own dang nervous system in a way that is more regulated and aligned can, like we said, can change how other people run theirs. If we stop being threatening, sometimes other people feel less threatened, and then they stop being threatening back. So just saying that even if you're in a relationship with somebody who like really isn't ready to do that work yet, you doing the work yourself can make a difference. If you're working for a boss or working with colleagues that like where you're feeling like this is a thing, sometimes the decision is, I can't do this in relationship with you. I need to step out. And oftentimes the decision is, I just need to do the work myself and then see what the next step is. So just wanted to say that too. So the last thing I wanted to talk about, because I've thrown a lot of information at you today. The last thing that I want to talk about is what looks like a fawn response that isn't. And we'll go way more into this when we get into freeze and faint. But it is the collapse submit response. So sometimes you are going to be in relationship with people, whether it's a superficial relationship, it's a customer, it's a client, it's a patient. It's sometimes it is more of a close relationship, a loved one, an intimate partner, where they are incredibly good at acquiescing, where they go along with everything that you say, where they don't know what they need. They don't have an opinion on what they need. If you try to get them to even articulate what it is that they need or what they want, they don't have an opinion. They can't tell you. They can't answer you. These are the patients that when you say, hey, this is the thing we're going to try, and they go, okay. And then they come back in the next week and they haven't tried the thing. And you go, oh, did you try the thing? And they're like, oh, no, but I will. And then that happens over and over and over. These are the patients that oftentimes or clients seem incredibly compliant, that will agree to anything that you say. They're subservient even sometimes. Absolutely. I will totally do that. And this actually, what it looks like, this is a people-pleasing response. And these people are actually in what we call collapse submit, which is a form of dissociation and faint. These people are I want you to think of and this is a graphic image, so I'm going to put a little bit of a content warning here. This is the dog that has been beaten into submission so many times that when you even get close to it, it just rolls over. You've seen these animals. This is the animal that has been broken, that has had so many intrusive things happen from a realm, those 5 realms, that they just acquiesce every time. They say yes every time. They're often quiet. And you'll notice the difference. Do you even notice, like, me thinking about this, did you notice how my speech slowed down? Did you notice how my body calmed down? Did you notice how I kind of shrunk down a little bit? They are closed down. They are contracted. Their dorsal vagal nervous system is dominating because they feel helpless. And this is why you can tell them to do all the things, and you can come up with a detailed plan of how they're going to do all those things, and they will leave your office and they will come back and they will have done none of it because they feel helpless. They will agree to agree. And the interesting thing about these people is that there's typically a little bit of fight in them somewhere. There is a little bit of fight. And when you can hit that, that's actually one of the ways that oftentimes we can bring people out of the dorsal vagal response is to activate the sympathetic nervous response and then help them find that middle ground where the ventral can start coming back online. But I wanted to talk about this because oftentimes we will identify those people as people pleasers. Those are not people pleasers. They are not people pleasing because you feel psychologically unsafe. They have experienced so much physical and psychological danger and damage over the course of their lifetime that they stay in that dorsal place because they don't feel like they can get out. So that is actually one of the hardest trauma responses to work with, is because it is hard to show somebody who feels absolutely helpless how to get out of the thing. And oftentimes these are your treatment refractory depression patients. These are patients with treatment refractory depression, where we have tried all the medications, we have tried all the therapies, we have done all the things, and they still feel incredibly depressed. And it's because their body believes that they are helpless, that we can try all the things and do all the things and they're not going to work. So activating that patient's fight response, activating that patient's body again, showing that patient that their body can actually respond, does have agency, they do have control over some things, is one of the best things you can do. And that is something that from my experience is above and beyond my scope of practice. I don't typically work with people who have treatment refractory depression. And I do oftentimes have clients who come to me that we will work together for several months because they're under the care of a psychiatrist. They've got all of that handled. And then we'll have this interesting conversation of they're like, yeah, it's so crazy. Like, I feel like my meds started working. And I'm like, interesting. How long have you been on those? And they're like, oh, years. And I'm like, okay, great. So probably actually not the meds. Probably you clearing out some trauma. Probably you finding some agency. Probably you finding some sense of control. And your body and brain starting to get on board with that. So just something I wanted to share from a clinical experience and from a coaching perspective that I found fascinating when I learned about this, because I then, went backwards and extrapolated out like the experiences that I had with clients, going like, oh, I'm pretty sure that's what's happened is we've pulled them out of faint. We've pulled them out of that frozen place. So does anyone have any questions before we wrap up? Like I said, I know this was a lot of information. If you decide to become one of the members in our TRIP certification that's launching in a few weeks, we're going to go way deeper into these things. You're going to have practical case studies that you work through. You're going to have question and answer sessions and hot seat sessions where you can bring what's happening in either your life or in your work life or in your, any situational experiences that you are having that we can talk through and we can apply these things to. But if you really feel like learning this in an hour has been helpful for you, then two things. One, you definitely want to scroll up in the comments, find the link that Sarah Kahn dropped for the free training that we're doing on the 10-second protocol and on how to increase satisfaction and retention in your personal and your professional relationships, and join the CERT program. And somebody just left a comment about being able to join. This is something that we haven't announced yet, but I'm excited to announce, is that at the Institute, we really believe in accessibility for people to this type of education and to, this life-changing knowledge, regardless of financial ability. So when you go to sign up for our TRIP certification, it's a $5,000 certification over 9 months. When you go to sign up for that, there are 3 payment options. There is a full, I can make the payment in full. I can pay this much a month. This is no problem. There is a, I can't pay that much a month, but I can pay this much a month, and I would like to apply for a partial scholarship. And then there's I can't pay anything right now, and I would really benefit from learning this. And you click that button and you let us know which payment option you want. And then we respond back and say, great. We have a scholarship fund of over $100,000 for people who are unable to pay or unable to make that financial commitment due to the fact that they are trying to live their lives and survive and thrive and take care of their families and do all the things. And we understand that this education can actually help you become more financially successful and secure. And so we want to make sure that the people who really need this can get it. And I will drop the link one more time because we've had a lot of comments on the live today. Here we go. I'm going to drop the link for the free training right now. And then, like I said, we'll be opening up the cart will be opening up access to the TRIP certification on the 17th at the end of that event. So if you are somebody who is really interested in participating in the certification, getting that certification, then you're definitely going to want to tune in and join in and take advantage of that scholarship fund that we have, because that's going to be on a first come, first serve basis. There are no applications. It's literally a box check where you put in your name, your email, and if you'd like the partial versus the full, and then it shoots an email off to us, and then we write you back and say, yep, we've got scholarship funding available, or the scholarship funds have been used up as of this moment. When we add in more funding, you're the first, your number, whatever, on our wait list. Like, we'll let you know as soon as there's another spot available. That's what that looks like. We really want this to be as, like I said, as financially accessible as possible to every person. So I have dropped the link for the 10-second protocol event. That is the free event. The certification link to check that out and to join will be available in 2 weeks. All right. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Feel free to DM me personally if there's something that you'd like to chat about that you didn't feel comfortable dropping in the chat. I completely understand that, and would like to make sure that you get your needs met. And yeah, I hope you have a fabulous rest of your day, rest of your week, and I will see you next week. Bye, y'all. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in learning more about how you can help yourself and others release shame, heal from trauma, and create healthier, safer, more mutually beneficial relationships, I want to invite you to head to our website, institutefortrauma.com. At institutefortrauma.com, you'll find free resources, be able to connect to our free online community, and view our courses and trainings, including our foundational trauma-informed, psychologically safe certification, aka the TRIP certification. Head to institutefortrauma.com today to learn more.